And welcome back to Love Your Food. This week we have a simple and delicious dessert recipe for you. This is for Thumbprint cookies. Now we're making ours with apricot jam, which is a video that we've done on the channel a long time ago, one of our most popular videos, but you can do it with all sorts of different things. I'd like to also remind everyone before we get started, we have a Patreon if you'd like to support us there. I'll put a link in the description below for that, and you can check that out. In the meantime, here's our ingredients. So we have some all-purpose flour, some granulated sugar, and some powdered sugar. We're using some vanilla paste. You can also use vanilla extract, 2 egg yolks, some butter, a little bit of salt, and then a little bit more granulated sugar and some almond flour, or ground almonds, and our apricot jam. And we actually ran the apricot jam through a strainer for the cookie part, and you'll see that later. So the first thing we're going to do is separate the eggs. So we're going to get, we're just using the yolks in this, so you can hold on to those whites for something else. You can whip them up and make them into meringues, whatever you prefer. We're just using the yolks in this one. So once you've got those separated, we're going to cream the butter, salt, and both kinds of sugar, so the granulated sugar and the powdered sugar together, until they are nice and fluffy. So we're just going to get all the sugar in there and the butter. Now, the base of these cookies is essentially a shortbread, which we did recently a video on. But the texture is a little bit different, so we're going to whip this until it's quite light and fluffy, and that will add a little bit of, just a little bit more lightness to these cookies, so they're not quite as dense and rich as a, well, they're still going to be pretty rich, but they're not going to be quite as dense and hard as a shortbread cookie, like we did the previous video about shortbread. And you can see here it's gotten nice and light. Now, of course, you're always going to want to scrape down the sides and make sure there's not chunks of unincorporated butter or sugar. At this point, we're going to add in our vanilla paste. Now, if you're using vanilla extract, you can add it now, or you can add it when you add the egg yolks, which is towards the end of this portion. So there goes the vanilla paste. We're going to add that in, and then we're going to start mixing this again once we get those egg yolks in. And there it goes. So we're going to cream all of that together until it is once again beautiful and light and fluffy. And there you go. You have that nice, quite pale, fluffy, and egg-enriched butter. Now you can see a little bit of butter still unincorporated on the paddle there. So you just want to make sure that's all well incorporated. And you want to scrape down the sides. There's some more unincorporated butter there. But once you have it all incorporated and it's all really nice and uniform and fluffy, it's time to get going with the rest of this recipe. So we're just going to give one last little scrape to make sure there's nothing unincorporated down at the bottom or on the paddle or anything. And once we're sure, it's time to add in our flour. Now you can do this in sections. You can add it in more than one pouring. We're just going to add it all at once, but you want to be careful. You want to start it on a pulse just so that it doesn't fly up everywhere and you get flour in the air. So we're just going to slowly incorporate that until it comes together. Now, you definitely want to stop about halfway through and make sure that you scrape down the side. You can see a lot of unincorporated flour in there. There's a lot on the sides. There's a lot just sort of clumped up at the bottom. So you just want to give that a nice scrape and make sure that everything is getting mixed in. As with any time you're using a mixer and you're trying to incorporate, different things. But as soon as it comes together, as soon as there's no unincorporated flour and it gets this sort of dough-like consistency, you want to stop. You don't want it to get too, you don't want too much gluten development from the flour. And once it's come to here, this is perfect. So it's the right texture. This makes it easy to use. It's not too sticky or anything. Now for the outside, we're going to be rolling these in the almond flour and this sugar. So we're just going to mix the sugar and almond flour together. And this will give a nice texture to the outside of the cookie. So once those are well combined and all nicely mixed together, then we are going to start measuring out our cookies. Now we're using a tablespoon measure here, and you don't want them much bigger than that. Now we're being a little bit generous on these, and we're going to just make them a tablespoon each. We're going to roll them into balls, and then we're going to roll them into our almond flour and sugar mixture here. And you want to make sure they're well coated and there's no like bare spots on them. And then you're going to put them on a baking sheet and you're just going to push down in the middle with the end of a wooden spoon to make that little thumbprint hole. And you want to do that pretty soon after you've got them out of that almond flour mixture, because it can dry them out a little bit. You don't want them to dry out, otherwise they will crack. You see some of them on here have actually cracked a little bit. You can reform them. It's just dough. They get that kind of Play-Doh consistency. So we're going to fill each one with a little bit. You don't want to overfill them too much, although it doesn't really matter. Some of them will overflow, as you can see here. And then we're going to put them into the oven to bake. Now, they don't bake for very long. And like many shortbreads, the trouble is it's kind of hard to tell when they're done. And they're not going to get a lot of color on the top. But the way you can usually tell a shortbread is done is when they have a little bit of color on the bottom. And not much either. You don't want them to be super, super dark or anything on the bottom. And it's tough to flip them over because they're honestly very delicate at this point. But you see that little ring of brown at the bottom, a little bit of color there. So these are ready to go. And now we're just going to break one open and we'll show you how nice inside. They've got that nice sort of tender, delicate filling inside. They look a little wet. They actually look a little underdone. But that's just sort of some of the moisture from the jam comes out into the cookie, and they're rich and delicious, and those were cooked all the way through. They were fantastic, and we hope you'll give this one a try. Very, very delicious. If you like this recipe, please do like and subscribe. And if you have any recipes you'd like to see Chef Caleb try on the channel, please let us know in the comments below. If you'd like to support us on our Patreon, we'll put the link in the description below, and thank you to all of our patrons over on Patreon. And remember to love your food.